The hardest revenge isn't making someone regret losing you. It's becoming someone they can no longer pretend they never lost. Nathan Brooks adjusted the cuff of his tailored charcoal suit as the valet closed the door behind him, and for a brief moment he admired his own reflection in the polished glass entrance of the Lakeside Country Club. The late afternoon sun scattered golden light across the marble steps, while strings of white roses framed the grand entrance where wedding guests drifted inside with champagne flutes and effortless laughter. Beside him, Olivia Bennet slipped her hand through his arm, the diamond on her finger catching enough sunlight to pull curious glances from nearby guests. She smiled the way people smiled when they believed the future had already been secured. Nathan liked that smile. It reminded him that he had made the right choice. At least, that was what he had repeated to himself for the past 3 years. "Ready?" Olivia asked softly. Nathan nodded with quiet confidence. "Let's make an entrance." They climbed the wide stone staircase together, moving at a pace just slow enough to be noticed. Nathan recognized several faces near the registration table. Former co-workers. Old neighbors. A retired attorney who had once attended his housewarming party. They greeted him with polite smiles, and Nathan responded with practiced warmth, introducing Olivia whenever he had the chance. He enjoyed the subtle pause that followed every introduction. Fiancée. The word carried weight. It sounded like proof that life had rewarded him. Soft violin music floated through the open doors, blending with the clink of crystal glasses and quiet conversations beneath towering chandeliers. Every polished surface reflected wealth without apology. Fresh lilies scented the air, and servers in crisp black uniforms moved gracefully through the ballroom carrying silver trays of sparkling water and champagne. Nathan felt completely at ease. This was exactly the kind of room where success belonged. He had worked hard to earn his place here. As they accepted 2 glasses from a passing server, Olivia leaned closer. "Do you know many people here?" "Enough," Nathan answered with a small grin. "Business circles overlap." She glanced around the elegant ballroom. "Looks like everyone important showed up." Nathan silently agreed. That was another reason he wanted to attend. Weddings gathered people who remembered every version of your life. There was satisfaction in letting them see how well things had turned out. He noticed several conversations briefly pause as he and Olivia crossed the room. Whether people admired them or simply recognized familiar faces hardly mattered. Attention was attention. Across the ballroom, photographers adjusted their cameras while guests gathered near enormous windows overlooking the lake, where sunlight shimmered across the water like scattered gold coins. Everything about the afternoon felt carefully designed to celebrate beautiful beginnings. Nathan believed he was standing inside one of his own. Then his eyes wandered toward the far side of the reception hall. At first, he noticed only a woman standing quietly near one of the floral arrangements, speaking with an older couple. She wore a simple navy dress that seemed elegant without trying too hard. Her posture was calm. Her smile was small but genuine. She wasn't trying to draw attention from anyone. Yet somehow, the room seemed to bend gently around her. Nathan frowned. Something about the way she tilted her head while listening stirred a memory he had locked away years ago. He looked again. This time, there was no mistake. His heartbeat slowed instead of racing. The violin music continued exactly as before, guests continued laughing exactly as before, and yet everything inside him became strangely quiet. Claire Whitmore had just walked back into his world, and Nathan still believed he was the one who had won. Nathan stared across the ballroom a second longer before Olivia followed the direction of his eyes. "Do you know her?" she asked with casual curiosity. He forced a quiet laugh that sounded more confident than he felt. "Someone I used to know." It was the easiest answer, the safest one, because the truth carried far more history than he was willing to unpack beneath crystal chandeliers and fresh white roses. 3 years earlier, Claire Whitmore had been the person who knew every version of him. She had stood beside him when his business existed only as sketches across their kitchen table, when late rent notices arrived before client payments, when every dollar required careful planning. She believed in possibilities before there was any evidence they would ever become reality. While Nathan chased promotions, networking dinners, and endless meetings, Claire quietly carried the invisible weight of everyday life. She managed the bills, canceled vacations they could not afford, celebrated small victories, and never complained when another anniversary dinner turned into another late night at the office. If success had been a staircase, Claire had spent years holding it steady while Nathan climbed. Somewhere along the way, Nathan convinced himself that he had climbed alone. Success changed more than his bank account. It changed the conversations he enjoyed, the restaurants he preferred, the people whose approval suddenly seemed important. The confidence that had once impressed Claire slowly became something sharper. He stopped asking her opinion. He began correcting her in front of other people. Tiny moments accumulated quietly, like dust settling over photographs nobody bothered to clean anymore. Claire noticed every change without announcing it. She simply became quieter. Nathan mistook her silence for weakness instead of disappointment. Then came the promotion that doubled his salary and tripled his ego. New clients invited him to exclusive events. Expensive watches replaced practical ones. Luxury cars became goals instead of fantasies. Somewhere inside that new world, Nathan started believing Claire no longer fit the life he imagined for himself. She preferred peaceful evenings over crowded cocktail parties. She asked thoughtful questions instead of chasing attention. She valued stability while he became obsessed with appearances. The differences felt larger every month until he convinced himself they had always been there. The divorce happened without dramatic arguments or broken promises shouted across empty rooms. It happened through signatures, quiet conversations, and the painful realization that two people could sit across the same table feeling completely different versions of the same marriage. Nathan walked away believing he had chosen a brighter future. Claire walked away carrying only a few carefully packed boxes and the same calm expression she wore even on the hardest day. She never begged him to stay. She never tried to compete with the exciting future he described. That bothered him more than he admitted. He expected heartbreak. Instead, she offered quiet acceptance. In the months that followed, mutual friends occasionally mentioned Claire, but Nathan rarely listened. Someone said she had changed careers. Another person mentioned she had moved into a smaller place across town. He assumed life had become difficult for her. Without ever asking, he filled in the missing pieces with assumptions that made him feel better about his own decisions. As long as he imagined Claire struggling, it was easier to believe leaving had been justified. Standing inside the elegant ballroom now, Nathan realized those assumptions suddenly felt fragile. The woman across the room did not resemble someone carrying regret. She stood with effortless composure, listening more than speaking, smiling without seeking attention, as though she belonged exactly where she was. Nothing about her invited sympathy. Nothing about her suggested she had spent years wishing for another chance. Nathan tightened his grip around the untouched champagne glass, still believing he understood Claire's story, never realizing that nearly every chapter after their divorce had been written without him. Nathan hesitated for only a second before setting his champagne glass on a passing server's tray. Olivia noticed the subtle shift in his expression and followed as he began walking across the ballroom with the quiet confidence that had carried him through countless business meetings. From a distance, Claire still had not seen him. She was listening attentively as the older couple beside her spoke, occasionally nodding with the relaxed patience of someone who had nowhere else she needed to be. There was no restless glance across the room. No nervous fidgeting. She looked completely comfortable in a place Nathan had already decided should have belonged to people like him. "You are really going over there?" Olivia asked with an amused smile. Nathan shrugged. "Why not? We ended things years ago. There is no reason it has to be awkward." Olivia gave a playful laugh. "I suppose she will be surprised to see you." Nathan believed that too. He imagined Claire would freeze for a moment, perhaps searching for the right words after so many years. Instead, before he could even speak, Claire turned naturally toward him as if she had sensed someone approaching. Her eyes settled on his face with calm recognition. No shock. No bitterness. No visible discomfort. Just quiet acknowledgement. "Nathan," she said warmly. "It has been a long time." Her voice carried the same gentle steadiness he remembered, yet something had changed beneath it. There was confidence now, not loud or performative, but deeply rooted. Nathan smiled. "Claire. I almost did not recognize you." She smiled politely. "I hope that is not because I have changed too much." "Maybe a little," he replied. "You look different." Claire simply nodded without asking what he meant. Nathan turned slightly toward Olivia. "This is my fiancée, Olivia Bennett." Claire extended her hand first. "It is nice to meet you, Olivia." Olivia accepted the handshake with practiced elegance. "Nathan has mentioned you before." Nathan glanced sideways, slightly surprised. He had never actually talked much about Claire, but he appreciated the implication. Olivia continued with an easy smile. "It is always interesting meeting people from someone's past." Claire answered without hesitation. "Life gives all of us interesting chapters." There was no edge in her voice. No attempt to compete. The conversation should have ended there, yet Nathan found himself wanting something more. Some sign that seeing him mattered. "So," he asked casually, "what have you been up to these days?" Claire looked toward the ballroom windows for a brief moment before returning her attention to him. "Working. Traveling when I have the opportunity. Spending time with people I care about." Nathan waited for details that never came. "Still living around here?" "Close enough." "Same career?" "Not anymore." She offered each answer with effortless simplicity, revealing almost nothing while sounding completely sincere. Olivia tilted her head slightly. "Nathan has become very busy these last few years. His company keeps him traveling almost every month." "That sounds exciting," Claire replied with a genuine smile. "Congratulations." Nathan expected curiosity. Instead, Claire accepted the information as though it had no effect on her at all. Wanting to fill the unexpected silence, Nathan added, "Things have worked out pretty well." "I am glad to hear that," Claire answered. Her expression remained unchanged, kind but unreadable. Nearby, laughter drifted across the ballroom as another group of guests gathered around the open bar. Crystal glasses chimed softly beneath the music. Everything around them continued moving, yet Nathan felt strangely unable to control the rhythm of this conversation. He had imagined confidence would come naturally once they met again. Instead, every carefully chosen sentence seemed to dissolve the moment Claire responded with quiet grace. She never asked whether he regretted leaving. She never mentioned their marriage. She never hinted at loneliness or disappointment. She simply stood there, entirely at peace with a life Nathan knew nothing about, and for the first time since entering the wedding, he found himself wondering whether he had walked into a story that was no longer centered around him. Nathan forced an easy smile, offered a polite nod, and excused himself before the silence became uncomfortable. Olivia slipped her arm through his again as they walked toward the refreshment table, but he could still feel Claire's calm presence behind him, as though the conversation had left an unfinished sentence hanging somewhere between them. "She seems different," Olivia observed while taking a sip of sparkling water. Nathan looked toward the ballroom without answering immediately. "People change." It sounded convincing enough, yet the words echoed strangely inside his own mind. He wanted to believe Claire's composure was only a carefully practiced mask. He wanted to believe the years had been harder on her than she allowed anyone to see. That assumption had protected his conscience ever since the divorce. Without it, he would have to reconsider the story he had told himself for years. What Nathan did not know was that the morning after signing the divorce papers, Claire had sat alone inside a quiet neighborhood coffee shop with nothing except a notebook, a cup of black coffee, and enough savings to cover only a few months of living expenses. There had been no dramatic promise to become successful. No secret inheritance waiting to rescue her. No wealthy stranger offering an opportunity. There had only been silence, exhaustion, and a simple decision that if her old life had ended, she would build another one with whatever she still possessed. She began accepting consulting projects that most experienced professionals considered too small to matter. She worked from borrowed desks inside shared workspaces, often staying until the lights dimmed late in the evening. Every paycheck covered another month of rent, another business course, another certification, another investment in skills that nobody applauded because nobody was watching. While many people chased recognition, Claire quietly pursued competence. Every morning began before sunrise with a notebook, fresh coffee, and a list of goals that grew slightly longer as her confidence slowly returned. She learned to negotiate contracts without apologizing for her value. She learned that saying no could be just as important as saying yes. She learned that disappointment could either become an excuse or become discipline. She chose discipline every single day. Success arrived gradually enough that it almost escaped notice. One satisfied client introduced her to another. A regional project became a national partnership. Small investments matured patiently while she resisted the temptation to spend money proving she had finally earned it. Instead of buying status, she built security. Instead of chasing luxury, she pursued freedom. Years passed before anyone outside her closest circle realized how dramatically her life had changed. Claire never announced promotions on social media. She never measured happiness by expensive photographs or public attention. The people who truly knew her noticed different things. They noticed that she smiled more easily. They noticed she no longer questioned her own decisions. They noticed peace replacing uncertainty in quiet, ordinary moments that could never be captured inside a headline. Back inside the elegant ballroom, Claire accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and thanked him by name after reading his small identification badge. The young man smiled with genuine surprise before continuing through the crowd. It was a tiny interaction that lasted only seconds, yet it reflected the woman she had become. She noticed people instead of performances. She valued kindness more than appearances. Across the room, Nathan watched absent-mindedly while pretending to follow Olivia's conversation. Something about Claire refused to fit the picture he had preserved in his memory. She did not seem like someone trying to prove anything. She did not carry herself like a woman hoping an old husband would regret his choices. She looked like someone who had stopped measuring her life against anyone else's years ago. Nathan could not explain why that unsettled him more than anger ever could, because quiet confidence had a way of exposing insecurities that loud success often managed to hide. The soft sound of a spoon tapping against crystal drew everyone's attention toward the center of the ballroom as guests slowly gathered around elegantly decorated tables. Conversations blended together beneath the warm glow of chandeliers, but Nathan found it difficult to focus on any of them. His eyes continued drifting toward Claire almost without permission. She was no longer standing alone. People seemed to find her naturally, each greeting her with the kind of warmth reserved for someone they genuinely respected. At first, Nathan assumed they were simply old friends from the bride's family. Weddings often reunited familiar faces. There was nothing unusual about that. Then he noticed something that quietly unsettled him. A distinguished gray-haired gentleman crossed nearly the entire ballroom, passing dozens of guests before stopping directly in front of Claire. He smiled broadly, shook her hand with both of his, and the two exchanged a brief conversation that ended with shared laughter. Nathan recognized the man immediately. Richard Ellison had built one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the state. Nathan had spent months trying to arrange a meeting with one of Richard's associates without success. Yet Richard spoke to Claire as though greeting a trusted colleague. "Who is that?" Olivia asked, following Nathan's gaze. "Someone important," Nathan answered quietly. Before either of them could continue, another guest approached Claire. This time it was an elegantly dressed woman whom Nathan recognized from a charity gala the previous year. She embraced Claire warmly before introducing her to two other guests. Their conversation lasted only a minute, but all three listened attentively whenever Claire spoke. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody seemed impatient. They treated her opinions as though they carried real weight. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. She seems to know quite a few people, Olivia observed. Nathan forced a shrug. Maybe she works with someone connected to the family. Even as he said it, the explanation felt incomplete. Across the room, the wedding coordinator hurried toward Claire carrying a small tablet. Instead of offering instructions, she smiled apologetically and appeared to ask Claire's opinion about something. Claire studied the screen for a moment, nodded calmly, and pointed toward one side of the ballroom. The coordinator thanked her before immediately changing direction and speaking with several members of the event staff. Nathan frowned. Guests did not normally help coordinate weddings. More importantly, staff members did not usually seek guidance from ordinary attendees. The pattern repeated itself again only minutes later. One of the photographers approached Claire, showed her several images on the back of his camera, and waited respectfully while she looked through them. Claire smiled, said something Nathan could not hear, and the photographer left looking noticeably relieved. Olivia laughed softly. She certainly seems popular. Nathan did not answer. Popular was not the word that came to mind. Influence looked different from popularity. Popular people attracted attention. Influential people attracted trust. Claire was not chasing conversations. Conversations kept finding her. Nathan suddenly realized something even stranger. None of the people greeting Claire appeared interested in impressing her. They already knew her well enough to skip formal introductions. Their smiles were relaxed. Their body language carried familiarity instead of obligation. Whatever place Claire held in their lives had clearly been earned long before this afternoon. A waiter paused beside Claire with a fresh glass of sparkling water before she even looked toward the refreshment table. She thanked him with another genuine smile, and the young man responded as though serving her was a privilege rather than a task. Nathan had attended enough exclusive events to recognize subtle differences in how people were treated. Respect like that could not be purchased in a single evening. It was built over time through countless interactions. As violin music filled the ballroom once again and guests began moving toward the reception tables, Nathan felt an unfamiliar sensation settle quietly beneath his confidence. For the first time since arriving, he stopped wondering whether Claire had rebuilt her life. Instead, he began wondering how much of it he had never known at all. Guests slowly found their seats as soft piano music replaced the violin ensemble, and candlelight flickered across polished glass and carefully arranged centerpieces. Nathan remained standing near the edge of the ballroom, watching conversations unfold while pretending to admire the elegant decorations. The more he observed Claire, the more impossible it became to fit her into the version of reality he had carried for 3 years. Olivia gently touched his arm. "You have been unusually quiet." Nathan offered a faint smile. "Just taking everything in." Before she could respond, the bride's father stepped onto the small stage and welcomed everyone with heartfelt gratitude. Laughter rippled through the room as he shared a few light-hearted memories about the newly married couple. The atmosphere relaxed, and dozens of guests lifted their glasses in celebration. Nathan finally exhaled. Perhaps he had simply overanalyzed a series of ordinary interactions. Weddings often brought together successful people from different circles. Claire could easily have made professional connections over the years. There was no reason to imagine anything extraordinary. Then the master of ceremonies returned to the microphone with a warm smile. "Before dinner is served, the families would like to recognize a few people whose generosity helped make this celebration possible." Applause filled the ballroom as several names were mentioned. Local friends. Family members. Longtime business partners. Nathan listened politely without much interest until one sentence quietly silenced every thought in his mind. "We would also like to extend our deepest appreciation to Claire Whitmore, whose support and guidance made this entire weekend possible. Claire, thank you for your extraordinary kindness." The applause that followed lasted noticeably longer than the others. Nathan instinctively turned toward Claire. She remained seated, smiling modestly as several nearby guests applauded with genuine affection. She offered only a small wave before gently shaking her head, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. There was no dramatic gesture. No attempt to enjoy the spotlight. She looked almost relieved when the applause finally faded. Nathan stared at the stage. Support and guidance. The words echoed repeatedly inside his head. Olivia leaned closer. Did he just say Claire? Nathan nodded slowly without taking his eyes off the stage. I think so. What exactly did she do? Nathan did not know. Moments later, the bride herself stood and walked directly toward Claire instead of remaining at the sweetheart table. She embraced her warmly, whispered something that made Claire laugh softly, and squeezed her hand before returning to her seat. The exchange lasted only seconds, but it carried the unmistakable warmth of genuine gratitude rather than social obligation. Nathan noticed several guests smiling as they watched the interaction, as though everyone present already understood something he did not. A man seated at Nathan's table noticed his expression and spoke casually while unfolding his dinner napkin. Claire never likes public recognition. Nathan turned toward him. You know her? Know her? The man smiled. Our company has worked with her organization for nearly 2 years. She has helped more businesses than she will ever admit. Nathan remained silent. The man continued, unaware of the storm quietly forming beside him. Most people hear her name long before they actually meet her. She has a remarkable reputation. Honest. Brilliant. Calm under pressure. You do not find many leaders like that anymore. Nathan felt his fingers tighten around the stem of his untouched glass. Reputation. Organization. Leader. None of those words belonged to the woman he believed he had left behind. Across the ballroom, Claire resumed her conversation as though nothing unusual had happened. She smiled, listened carefully, and thanked the servers as dinner plates were placed in front of each guest. She carried herself with the quiet ease of someone who had nothing left to prove. Nathan suddenly realized the greatest surprise was not that Claire had become successful. It was that everyone else in the room had already known it except him. The applause gradually faded as dinner was served, yet Nathan barely noticed the elegant meal placed before him. Around the ballroom, conversations flowed easily, glasses were raised in celebration, and laughter echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling, but every few moments another guest stopped beside Claire's table. Some came only to greet her. Others thanked her for advice she had given months earlier. One older gentleman even introduced his daughter with unmistakable pride, saying that Claire had encouraged her to start a business when almost everyone else had doubted her. Claire accepted every compliment the same way. She smiled, redirected the praise toward others whenever possible, and listened far more than she spoke. There was nothing rehearsed about her kindness. It had become part of who she was. Nathan watched the steady procession with growing disbelief. The room no longer felt random. A pattern had emerged, and he was the only person who had failed to recognize it. Olivia quietly leaned closer. I thought you said she disappeared after the divorce. Nathan hesitated before answering. I assumed she kept a low profile. Olivia looked toward Claire again. This does not look like someone hiding from the world. Nathan could not disagree. Across the ballroom, Richard Ellison stood once more, this time accompanied by 2 executives Nathan recognized immediately from regional business conferences. Nathan had spent years hoping to meet even one of them. Instead of gathering near influential investors or elected officials, all 3 walked directly toward Claire. They greeted her with easy familiarity before pulling out empty chairs and joining her table. Their expressions carried respect rather than courtesy. Nathan could almost feel years of invisible conversations existing long before tonight. A familiar voice interrupted his thoughts. Nathan Brooks, right? He turned to see an older financial consultant he had met briefly the previous year. Nathan smiled politely and stood to shake his hand. "Good to see you again." They exchanged a few routine comments before the consultant casually glanced across the ballroom. "I did not realize you knew Claire Whitmore." Nathan answered carefully. "We go back quite a while." The consultant smiled with genuine admiration. "You are fortunate. She is one of the most remarkable people I have ever worked with." Nathan forced another smile while something inside him tightened. "You have worked together?" "Several times," the consultant replied. "She has an extraordinary ability to see opportunities years before everyone else does. More importantly, she never forgets the people who helped her along the way. Success has only made her more generous." Nathan found himself searching for an appropriate response but came up empty. Every sentence he heard erased another assumption he had carried since the divorce. He had imagined Claire rebuilding a modest life. Instead, people described someone whose judgment influenced major decisions, whose character inspired loyalty, and whose reputation reached rooms. Nathan still struggled to enter. As dessert arrived, the bride's mother walked to Claire's table carrying a small envelope tied with a silver ribbon. She placed it gently into Claire's hands before embracing her with visible emotion. Claire smiled softly, whispered something that brought tears of gratitude to the older woman's eyes, and carefully slipped the envelope into her handbag without opening it. The exchange lasted only moments, yet it revealed a relationship built on trust far deeper than ordinary friendship. Nathan suddenly realized he had spent the entire evening waiting for Claire to acknowledge what he had become, while never once considering what she herself had become. The confidence he had worn like a perfectly tailored suit when he entered the ballroom now felt strangely uncomfortable. Looking around the room, he noticed something impossible to ignore. People did not admire Claire because of expensive clothes, luxury cars, or public attention. They admired her because her presence made them feel seen, respected, and valued. Wealth may have changed her circumstances, but character had built everything standing before him tonight. For the first time in years, Nathan quietly questioned whether leaving Claire had ever been the greatest decision of his life, or the greatest mistake he simply refused to recognize until it was far too late. The evening settled into an easy rhythm as conversations drifted between old memories and hopeful plans for the newly married couple. Outside, the lake reflected the last traces of sunset while soft lights illuminated the garden surrounding the country club. Nathan stepped onto the terrace for a breath of cool air, hoping the quiet would settle the questions that had followed him since the moment he saw Claire. Instead, the glass doors opened gently behind him. Claire walked onto the terrace alone, carrying nothing more than a glass of sparkling water. She paused when she noticed him, then smiled with the same calm warmth she had shown all evening. "Beautiful night," she said. Nathan nodded. "It really is." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence felt unfamiliar. Years ago they could sit together without needing words. Tonight, silence carried the weight of everything that had changed. Nathan finally broke it. "I had no idea you were involved with this wedding." Claire looked toward the lights shimmering across the lake. "The bride and I met several years ago through a community project. We became friends. Everyone here seems to know you." She gave a small laugh. "Not everyone." Nathan smiled faintly. "You know what I mean." Claire looked at him with quiet understanding but did not answer immediately. "Life has introduced me to many wonderful people," she finally said. "I have been fortunate." Nathan searched her face, waiting for something that sounded like pride, satisfaction, or even triumph. None of it appeared. She spoke about her success the same way someone might describe the weather, grateful but never boastful. "You have done well for yourself," Nathan admitted. Claire nodded politely. "Life has been kind to me, but only after it taught me some difficult lessons." Nathan lowered his eyes for a moment. "I suppose I was one of those lessons." Claire did not rush to answer. She watched a gentle breeze ripple across the dark water before speaking. Every season teaches us something. I do not spend much time deciding which seasons were fair and which were not. There was no accusation hidden inside her words. No bitterness waiting beneath the surface. Nathan almost wished there had been. Anger would have been easier to understand than peace. Do you ever think about those years? He asked quietly. Claire smiled with quiet honesty. Sometimes. They were part of my life. I learned valuable things during that time. Do you regret any of it? Nathan asked. She looked directly into his eyes, her expression gentle but unwavering. No. Regret keeps people standing in places they have already outgrown. Nathan felt the words settle heavily inside him. Before he could respond, Olivia stepped onto the terrace, searching for him. She slowed as she noticed Claire standing nearby. For a brief moment, all three stood beneath the soft garden lights. Olivia smiled politely. I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all, Claire replied. We were just enjoying the view. Olivia looked at Claire with new eyes now. The confidence she had displayed earlier in the evening had softened into sincere respect. It was lovely meeting you tonight, she said. I can understand why so many people speak so highly of you. Claire thanked her with genuine warmth. That is kind of you. There was no competition between the two women. No attempt to compare accomplishments or appearances. Claire had nothing to defend because her peace did not depend on anyone else's opinion. A wedding coordinator opened the terrace door and approached Claire with an apologetic smile. Claire, the bride was hoping you could join the family for one photograph before the evening ends. Claire nodded. Of course. She turned back toward Nathan and Olivia. I hope you both have a wonderful evening. With that, she walked back inside, greeted by smiling faces before she even reached the ballroom. Nathan remained on the terrace watching the doors close behind her. He finally understood that Claire had never returned to prove he had been wrong. She had simply continued living a life so full of purpose that proving anything had become unnecessary, and somehow that quiet truth echoed louder than any victory he had ever imagined. The celebration slowly drew to a close as the final song drifted through the ballroom, its gentle melody blending with the quiet conversations of guests reluctant to leave such a beautiful evening behind. Outside, the parking area shimmered beneath rows of warm lanterns, and the lake reflected thousands of tiny lights that danced across the still water. Nathan stood near the entrance holding his jacket over one arm while Olivia spoke with another couple. For the first time in years, he found himself looking backward instead of forward. Throughout his career he had measured success with promotions, larger contracts, and invitations into increasingly exclusive rooms. Tonight had quietly rewritten every one of those measurements. Across the ballroom, Claire was saying goodbye to the bride and her family. The bride embraced her tightly, thanking her one last time before the newlyweds disappeared through a tunnel of cheering guests holding sparklers beneath the evening sky. Claire laughed with them, applauded their happiness, and stepped aside so the couple could enjoy the moment without interruption. Even during someone else's celebration, she somehow made the people around her feel like the most important individuals in the room. Nathan watched her from a distance, finally understanding something he had missed years ago. He had once mistaken gentleness for weakness. He had confused quiet confidence with a lack of ambition. He had believed that because Claire never demanded attention, she would never become extraordinary. The truth standing before him proved exactly the opposite. Extraordinary people rarely needed to announce themselves. Their character traveled ahead of them long before they entered the room. Olivia returned to his side and slipped her hand into his. She followed his gaze toward Claire before speaking softly. She seems happy. Nathan nodded. She does. Olivia smiled thoughtfully. I think happiness looks different than I imagined. Nathan looked at her with quiet curiosity. What do you mean? She glanced around the ballroom one last time. Everyone respected her before anyone mentioned what she had accomplished. That is rare. Nathan let those words settle. Respect earned through character lasted longer than admiration earned through appearances. It was a lesson no business seminar had ever taught him. Moments later, Claire walked toward the exit carrying only a small handbag and a light shawl over her shoulders. A valet greeted her by name before bringing her vehicle to the entrance. Nathan noticed that she thanked him with the same sincerity she had shown every server, every coordinator, and every guest throughout the evening. Nothing about her kindness changed depending on who stood in front of her. As she prepared to leave, Claire noticed Nathan standing nearby. She offered one final smile, warm, peaceful, and completely free of resentment. "Take care of yourself, Nathan," she said gently. He swallowed before answering. "You too, Claire." There were countless things he suddenly wished he could explain. He wanted to apologize for every assumption he had made after the divorce. He wanted to admit that he had mistaken success for significance and appearances for fulfillment. Most of all, he wanted to tell her that he finally understood the value of the person he had once taken for granted. But some realizations arrived too late to become conversations. Claire stepped into her car, thanked the valet once more, and quietly drove away beneath the glow of the evening lights without ever looking back. Nathan remained standing at the entrance until the taillights disappeared beyond the trees. He realized she had not spent the evening proving him wrong. She had spent the past 3 years proving herself right. The greatest victory had never been becoming wealthier than the man who left her. It had been building a life so meaningful that his opinion no longer held the power to define her future. Nathan arrived at the wedding believing he had already won years ago. He left understanding that Claire had never been trying to win him back. She had simply chosen herself, and in doing so, she had found something far greater than revenge. She had found peace.